Welcome to Compassionate Heart Parenting. I'm Michelle. If you've ever snapped at your kids and then felt the wave of guilt afterward, or wondered why you reacted that way, you're not alone. After 15 years as an emotionally focused therapist, I have learned that parenting brings up emotions we didn't even know we were carrying. Here, we'll explore what's beneath those reactions and the small shifts that can help you respond with more calm and connection. Welcome to Compassionate Heart Parenting. I'm your host, Michelle. You've read the books, you know the theory, you believe in connection over control, empathy over punishment, and collaboration over compliance. And then your child does the thing. And none of what you've learned is available to you in that moment. Does this sound familiar? Here's what I've learned after 15 years as an emotionally focused therapist and a mom of three. Peaceful parenting isn't primarily a set of techniques, it's an inside job. And today's guest has spent over a decade helping thousands of parents understand exactly what that means in real life. Sarah Rosensweet is a certified peaceful parenting coach, the founder of Reimagine Peaceful Parenting, and the host of the top-rated Peaceful Parenting podcast. She's also a mom of three. Her two sons have launched into the world, and her daughter is 18, which means she has actually parented all the way through with this philosophy. If you've ever wondered why you keep reacting in ways that don't reflect who you want to be as a parent and what it actually takes to change that from the inside, this conversation is for you. Hello, Sarah. So let me just jump right in because I know people are going to be eager to hear from you. I want to start with something that I think every parent in this space has felt, this experience of genuinely wanting to respond calmly to their child especially when their kiddo's having a hard time, and then not being able to access their calm in the moment. And you've been coaching parents for over a decade. What do you think is really happening there? And why is peaceful parenting sometimes so much harder to do than it is to understand?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's all sorts of, just to start like a higher level, there's all sorts of physical things that happen too. Like if you're tired or if you're rushing or, you're stressed, it's hard to access that calm when you don't have resources, right? So I think that's one thing that if you've got to give yourself a little grace, if, say you have a baby and you were like up in the night with the baby and you're tired and your 3-year-old is doing, as you said, all doing the things, give yourself a little grace because it is hard to stay calm or find your calm again when you have low resources. So I just wanted to like say that straight off the bat because sometimes there are things that are out of our control. And of course we can work on, trying to take care of ourselves and give ourselves better resources. But sometimes no matter what your intentions are, because of things that are outside your control, it's really hard to stay calm. And I always say, and this is the second thing I want to talk about in a second, but there are two things that I find that if people don't really fully embrace these two big ideas, it's impossible to do peaceful parenting. And one
Mm.
of them is self-compassion. So if you can't access that compassion for when you didn't respond in the way that you wish you had responded, you're never going to be able to get to where you want to go as a peaceful parent. Like really, really, truly beating yourself up never ever helps, right? So really, and you want to tell yourself in those moments, I'm worthy and lovable, even though I yelled at my 3-year-old this morning when she wasn't, getting up and getting ready to go or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
that self-compassion piece really is huge. And I would
Mhm.
say the second piece that really affects our ability to stay calm, which is also one of the big ideas of peaceful parenting that's really important to truly embrace, is that kids are doing the best they can. And if you don't remember that in those hard moments, it's almost impossible to stay calm because we feel like we're in a victim. If we think they're doing this on purpose or they're trying to, one person that I work with is always saying she was trying to annoy me. And I'm like, well, she's probably, you might feel annoyed, but that's probably not at the root of what your daughter's behavior is. She's not trying to annoy you. And if you do feel like your kid is trying to annoy you or they're being a jerk on purpose, I say jerk in quotation marks, then you're going to feel like the victim in the situation. And, that is a horrible feeling, to feel like powerless and that people are out to get you or whatever. So, really remembering that kids want to be good, they're doing the best they can. And you probably share this with your people too, but that the saying, they're not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time, is so
Mhm.
important in those moments.
Oh my goodness, I love that reframe. They're not giving me a hard time, right? Because you're speaking directly to all the cultural messages that are so loud. Even though I completely, like, after reading and learning, I embraced a peaceful parenting, but I still had these cultural messages in my head that were like, they're being disrespectful, they're being this,
Mhm.
I can't let other people see this, this is terrible behavior, and on and on and on. And it was so frustrating to have those loud cultural messages, even though intellectually I understood the concept of development and attachment and that they were needing something. And like you
Mhm.
said, believing that they're good inside and that they're not trying to annoy us or manipulate us or do all these things that are cultural messages, that if we can cut through all of that, and sometimes we do need, probably we often need reminders, like sticky notes in front of our face in the moment,
Mhm.
because our brain will start telling us these really unhelpful thoughts that our kids giving us a hard time. So I love that. And then I love the other thing that you said. I wish that I had heard you speak about that 10 years ago, the self-compassion piece, because when I was first starting to do peaceful parenting, I would do exactly that, fall into a heap of shame,
Mhm.
beat myself up. Why can't I do this? On and on and on. And it was only after I started doing Kristen Neff's self-compassion work and Tara Brach's self-compassion work that things started to shift internally, which then made peaceful parenting so much easier. Not easy, but easier,
No.
because
Yeah, it's never easy. It's never easy. This approach, it
yeah.
really is a lot of work. But the other thing that I find is that if you do give yourself some compassion, it actually makes you less reactive,
Mm.
because you're not like clenching all the time. Like, I can't yell, I can't yell. If you know that I'm human, I might mess up sometimes. It actually
Mm.
makes you go into situations not on edge, if that makes sense.
It does. And you know what I found too is the more I can cultivate self-compassion for myself, and the more that it's easier to be compassionate with my children. And I
Hmm.
put a section of compassion, of self-compassion in the Yelling to Connecting course I have. And it's almost like, do I want to tell parents this? Because I feel like there is this kind of natural almost pushback against self-compassion, and um it seems like it's getting more accepted now, like, hey, maybe self-criticism doesn't really work. But I love that you're just speaking directly to that this is such an important ingredient and component to peaceful parenting.
Well,
um
you talked about the work of Kristen Neff, and that's sort of the cultural, what we're swimming, the culture we're swimming in. And I think culturally we do have that no pain no gain attitude sort of in our culture, right? That's partly why so many people think punishment is necessary, right? You can't learn, children can't learn without without you making them feel bad. And I'm not going to learn unless I make myself feel bad. But what the research actually shows, and Kristen Neff, she was actually on my podcast a few years ago, and she was talking about this research that they were doing with college sports teams.
Mhm.
And she said that they weren't calling it self-compassion because they didn't want, because they didn't think anyone would want to sign up for it. But what they
Right.
had were two groups, and one group they were sort of in, sports is sort of a traditional, like the coach, yelling at everyone when they make mistakes, like the sort of
Mhm.
stereotypical people being hard on you if you mess up. And so what they had two control groups, and one of them they coached in self-compassion and the other one they didn't. And what they found was the group that had been coached in self-compassion was performing better than the group that hadn't been coached in self-compassion. So like you said, people are accepting it more. And I think scientifically they're showing, like through research, that actually self-compassion is effective, right? And it actually does help us do better than beating ourselves up does. And, I often have parents will say to me, well, I don't want to let myself off the hook. And I
Mhm.
recently reread Alfie Kohn's Unconditional Parenting, and he talks about that in his book. Do you know that book?
I don't. I'm gonna have to write that down
Okay,
in
so
my
that
book
was
list.
that was one of the earliest books that I read. I think it came out in 2003 maybe. So it was a really early peaceful parenting book. But he talks about like you don't need to beat yourself up to do something that's really important to you. Like
Mhm.
it's being the best parents that we can be is so important to us that we don't need to beat ourselves up to do that because we want to do it anyways, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I'm just thinking how when we beat ourselves up, and it comes in different forms, right? Like second guessing ourselves, or I know that I struggle a lot with like, I don't want anybody to see me not punish my kids. I mean, it was harder when they were younger. Now it's a little easier that they're older, but when they were little, and so there would be just this constant pressure of, am I connected enough? Are
Mhm.
they okay? Are they safe enough? And am I doing the right things? And so even though it was kind of a form of self-criticism and it's exhausting, it takes such a heavy toll that it kind of that I feel like that is what makes parenting so heavy. Like it's hard enough, right? Our kids are going to have a hard time. They're going
Mhm.
to go through these different developmental stages. But then when we add all these layers of guilt and self-criticism and shoulds and our individualistic culture, which sends us the message we should be able to do it all by
Yeah.
ourselves. We shouldn't need
Yeah.
any support. We should be able, if I can't do this, there's something wrong with me. And it's kind of like, oh my, it hurts my heart that as I know so many people are still in that space, and I spent years in that space. Um,
Yeah, there's so much room for messing up. I mean, you're probably familiar as a therapist, you're familiar with the good enough mother, the good
mhm,
enough parent. And I think that's really like what you're describing sounds like perfectionism. Like I always have to be connected. I always have to be, not punishing. I mean, I don't think we should punish, but like that perfectionism of like, putting everything into being a parent, which isn't healthy for anyone, right? Like we have to have our own we have to have we have to put energy into ourselves too, into what makes us thrive, because if we're not thriving, or at least making movements towards, I don't want to add another layer of perfectionism that you have to be thriving, but like if
right,
you're not doing anything for yourself and just putting everything into your kids, like that's not healthy either, right?
right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many unhelpful places that we can spin off as parents. And I think that's what helps with self-compassion is when we notice those spin-offs, we can
Hmm.
we can offer ourselves self-compassion for all the like for perfectionism, for guilt, for whatever other things that we as parents struggle with. That self-compassion is awesome for meeting us where we are. And I was
Well,
gonna,
I loved what you said too about when you have more compassion for yourself, you also have more compassion for your children.
Mhm.
Because I think sometimes people will like, be pretty good at compassion for their kids, but they don't have it for themselves or vice versa. But it's really, peaceful parenting in my mind isn't like, it's a way of living, right? So what we're trying to do, I think one of the biggest things we're trying to do is raise kids who feel worthy and lovable even when they mess up and make mistakes.
Mhm.
And that's part of why we don't use punishment, because we want them to, feel that they aren't loved more when they are exactly what we want them to be or
Good.
do, right?
Mhm.
But we can't do that if we're not doing that for ourselves also, and we can't do it for we can't do it for ourselves if we're not doing it for our kids. So I just love that you brought up that that really both they affect each other.
Yes, 100%. It's kind of, and I love that you said it's a way of living. It's a way of
Mhm.
being. It's not like a parenting tool or a strategy. There are those in it, but it really is this shift of philosophy and yeah, a way of being. I love the way that
Yeah.
you put that.
I have a client I've worked with a long time ago now, and she was talking about how much peaceful parenting has changed her life. And she said, I'm not only a better parent, I'm a better dentist. She was a dentist, right? She said it's really affected like all areas of my life. Like really looking at not only are kids doing the best they can, but people are generally doing the best they can. And, if you're looking at, collaboration and teamwork when your kids are little, and that carries you through the older years, and it really is kind of just a way of living.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that because that's one of the things that I see with parents is they start off with maybe like, okay, the science says this will help me have kids with good behavior. And then it's like, oh, wait, this really isn't about having good behavior. This is about connection. And then
Hmm.
you run into all these moments again and again and again where stuff gets triggered for you as a parent, and it's actually hard to respond calmly or all these things get stirred up. And what I have found is that when parents start to use those moments as like learning about themselves. Oh, that really triggered me. That's interesting. What was it about my son ignoring me or my daughter slamming the door or talking back or whatever? And then going inward and looking at, okay, what was that trigger about for me? And sometimes it's thinking back to how was it for me when I was 12 and how did my
Yeah.
parents respond to me? And what's really cool is, like you said, when you can bring that self-compassion piece, is parents start to experience healing around all of these experiences that make those moments so triggering. And
Hmm.
they're less triggering. And now it's kind of like you said with your client that you worked with that was a dentist that was like, oh wow, like I'm not just feeling more connected to my kids and finding, these difficult moments easier, but like I feel different and I feel like calmer and more centered. And so I love that you've seen that in your work with parents.
Yeah, isn't it wild? I mean, I often wonder people who never have kids, which, totally valid choice, but they get to go around without all of their like really deep stuff getting triggered, right? Like, and maybe other things trigger them, but my husband and I were talking the other day about the age. So we had our first child when we were 30, and I was saying how we should have started earlier because we would have probably had more than three kids if we had started earlier. And he said, I don't know. I think I needed those years to like, what he said, I probably could have used more years to work on myself. And I was like, dude, I don't think it matters. Like, I think you would have gotten your issues would have come up if we had kids at 25 or 35 or 45, and they would not have come up until having kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
100%.
having the kids, whatever age you are, is what brings up all of the deeper things that you need to work on, right?
Yes, yes. And I like to think of these moments as it's kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist nun, and she talks about like difficult moments and difficult people can be our teacher, right? So
Hmm.
we kind of want to move away from them. We're like, oh, I don't want my kid to have another meltdown and I hate how I respond or whatever it is. Like it's so natural to not enjoy those and want to move
Yeah, we
away
want
from them.
comfort, right? We want ease and comfort.
Do. And if we even if a little tiny part of us can think of those moments as like, okay, I'm gonna learn and grow, and oftentimes, I don't know if you see this with your parents too, but those moments bring us closer to our kids. Like the
Totally. Yeah.
child has a meltdown. I've seen this and with my own kids, and it's so heartwarming. Like the meltdown's terrible and super not fun. It is helpful, like you said, to remember like they're having a hard time. They're really struggling and I'm here with them. They're not alone. Like that's comforting. But then after when they've kind of gone through the storm, it's like they look at me like, oh, thank you for being here
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah. I mean, think of how,
Or,
like, if you're having a hard time and your best friend really shows up for you, you're going to feel closer to your best friend after you feel
hey,
better, right? Like, it's just that, we connect in like the warm moments and we connect in the hard moments. Like, it's just that human um yeah, like it's really powerful to be able to. And I often will say that to parents, like, not only are you like getting through the moment, but you're also teaching your child that you are there for them. I have a funny, well, not funny story, but when my oldest son was, I don't know, he was probably two, and at that point I was the only one who put him to bed. and I was getting kind of tired of being the only one to put him to bed. And
Yes.
so but it was because he was like, wanted me every night to put him to bed.
Oh, I
And
see.
then my husband and I decided, okay, we're gonna just do it. Like my husband will put him to bed, and he was crying and crying. Mama, mama, I want mama. And I'm out in the living room like, oh, this is so horrible. And so I called my dad, who's a psychologist, and I was like, you got Lee's in there crying and Jesse's putting him to bed and I can hear him calling for me. And my father was like, do not go in there, he said. And this was really powerful for me. And I've shared this so many times with parents in the situation. It was like, my dad said, he needs to learn that his dad is there for him as well as you being there for him. Right. So in that, like when my husband was able to just be there with our son, he did learn like, oh, my dad is, even when things get really rocky, my dad's not giving up on me. He's going to be here with me even when I'm, having a hard time.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I'm sure every parent has had that moment of whatever it is. It feels guilt, torn, all those things. And to kind of remember, like, oh, this is, like there's a closeness that's going to come with their other parent as well, even though it might be like uncomfortable to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious about this for you because you have older kids. Like my kids now that are 12, my son and daughter have mentioned a few times, like, I really appreciate that you parent this way, even though they don't really understand, all the ins and outs about it, but they do see that I don't punish and they do see, these kind of things. And they'll say, like, oh, I really appreciate how understanding you are. My son said to me the other day, not all parents are that understanding. And I was just like, oh,
Aw, that's lovely.
it feels so good to hear them actually be able
Mhm.
to talk about that. So I'm wondering with your kids being in their 20s, almost 19, 20 something and 20 something, what, if anything, do they say about
Yeah.
how you've parented them? And
Well, one thing that they noticed, and this isn't me, I mean, I think it is a factor of peaceful parenting, but they noticed how much more independent they were as teenagers than their friends were.
mm,
And I think that is part of peaceful parenting too, is really tuning into, like, at least for me, part of my brand of peaceful parenting is like autonomy is a huge thing, because that, instead of controlling kids, you're really giving them a lot of autonomy. And I think they noticed that as they got to be older, that because they weren't controlled, they had to figure things out more themselves. And so they all commented on that when they were in high school, that a lot of their friends didn't seem to know, how to get around the city, or they really just, that my kids felt like their friends relied on their parents too much. And
mm,
so that was one interesting thing. And I think that my kids, I'll have to ask them about this because I haven't talked to them about it in a while, but I think that they recognize that they like us more than their friends might like their parents. Like they spend more time with us than their friends might spend with their parents. Like they still go on, you know, at least once a year, we'll do like a week of, visiting my parents in Vermont or visiting my dad in Florida, and
mm.
they'll, even at 21 and 25, they'll take a week off of work and,
Oh,
and do this with us as a family, which I think is pretty unusual. I mean, I'm pretty close to my parents, but I wasn't going on trips with them when I was 25.
hmm hmm. Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of that autonomy thing too is a piece that I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about that it really builds it really, yeah, if you're not being controlled, because the unintended consequence of control too is, yeah, removing autonomy and confidence in yourself to make decisions, confident that
100%.
I have what I need and I have the capacity and I can trust myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's really cool that they notice that and that
They all three of them said things at different points in high school about how much more competent and confident and independent they felt than their peers.
right. Yeah. And I love that other part that you're talking about the relationship that I try to think and remind parents of, like, we're not just parenting for them to have better behavior, even though, of course, it's something that we all naturally want. We're not even just parenting for them to be, to do well in school or whatever. Like we're parenting them for connection. And
Hmm.
And like you're saying, to help them build their resilience and self-esteem and self-confidence and autonomy and all those things. But also, we're parenting for connection and we're putting our relationship first. And so then it does look a little bit different in high school and in college, I would imagine, because you're focusing on how based on how I respond to you is how you feel about me as a parent. And
Yeah.
like aside from this parent-child relationship, we just have a person-to-person relationship. And if I wouldn't talk down to, a person at the grocery store or a colleague or what have you, I don't want to talk down to my children. And if I would treat these other people respectfully, I would want to treat them respectfully. And um I feel like that is a huge benefit of peaceful parenting that, yeah, that we get to experience, even though
Yeah.
it is trickier, right? It maybe in some ways it's might be easier at times to punish and just like squash a behavior. It's harder to think about what's really happening and how can I respond if I can't punish? Like, how am I going to
Mhm.
set a
Mhm.
limit and bring like boundaries and all of that? I think you're right. I think at times it's definitely more challenging, and there's so many benefits that come from it.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't hit the teen years yet, but I always tell people like peaceful parenting is a lot of work, and you're either going to put in the work when they're little and doing all of the, guiding without punishment and really working on the connection and stuff. You're either going to put it in then or you're going to put it in when they're teenagers, when you don't have that connection. There's
Mm.
a quote from Thomas Gordon, who was one of the sort of grand, you're probably familiar with his work, but he said that let me think, how does the quote go? It's like the downside of using control when kids are young is that you never learn how to influence them.
Mm.
And that is I found that to be the hugest, benefit that I wasn't even aware of until I got there of peaceful
Mhm.
parenting. My oldest son, when he was in high school, he was telling me he was probably about 16, and he was saying, "Mom, so many of my friends don't like tell their parents where they're going, and they ignore the calls when they call them, and some of them don't even go home at night." And he said, "You're really lucky that I care what you and dad think." And that's like really like when you have teenagers who care what you think, it makes parenting teenagers so much easier. Like they really, like honestly, it's so funny. My daughter, last year, and so she was 17, I guess. I overheard her on the phone with her boyfriend, and she said, "My parents are 0% strict." And I was like, 0% strict. Like I was really surprised that she said that, because she certainly wasn't just like, no rules, allowed to do whatever she wanted. And
Mhm.
I ran it by her brothers, and I was like, "Why do you think she said that?" Because we were actually on vacation together at the time. And I said, "Why do you think she said that?" And they were laughing, and they said, "Well, because she never wanted to do anything bad." And I was like, I don't think that's it. But what I do think it was is that everything felt collaborative.
Mhm.
So when you have a collaborative, like, are you going to go to this party? Like, or are you going to do this thing? And it's
Mhm.
not like a top-down decision of, no, you're not doing that. She just didn't, even if she wasn't allowed to do things, it didn't
Mhm.
feel like we were being strict because we were being collaborative and we were just talking through everything, which,
Mhm.
is going to support that decision making as she gets older. And I don't have control. I mean, I don't have control anyways, but she could just walk out if she wanted to. But, I
Mhm.
have the illusion of control, I guess. But
Right.
as she gets older and she's not living here anymore, and, this is what happened with her brothers, because we walk through all of those processes and being collaborative and making decisions, they have that in their heads when they're making their own decisions about, what are the factors here? What are the risks? How am I going to,
Mhm.
what would I do in this situation if this thing happened, instead of just like the parents deciding top down. It's the
Right.
autonomy piece again. But like when you're collaborating with your kids through their whole growing up, and it's
Mhm.
not just about the parents deciding what limits are going to be set and how, that's how kids are, their brains are developing in for that skill for themselves.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And it kind of sounds like you're saying it's easier to get to that place in teenage years when you start with them when from birth, if you can, if you know about this way of parenting, because then you practice like not controlling a 2 year old, and like
Hmm.
that's really hard. And you
Hmm.
practice like how do you collaborate? Probably it looks very different, but how do you collaborate with a 2 year old, and how do you
Hmm.
respond and set limits without punishments and control? And so you're like practicing and practicing and practicing
Yeah.
and
And
practicing.
and I will point out if somebody's listening and they haven't been doing this since their kids were young, it's never too late. Like you can always work on your connection. You can always, change to a collaborative method.
Mhm.
And the other thing too about when you do use collaboration with a 2 year old, of course there are going to be times where you just have to say like, no, you can't. I read something funny yesterday is like my 2 year old's losing their mind because I won't let them walk into the fireplace or whatever. Maybe it was a 1 year old. It was like funny tweets from parents. But there are those times where we just absolutely have to set a health or safety limit. And if
Mhm.
your child has been experiencing, I call this the goodwill bank. If your child has been experiencing you as, collaborative and flexible and trying to accommodate their preferences whenever you can, then
Mhm.
those times when you do have to say, like, I know this isn't what you want and you don't understand why I am saying no to this, it's much easier for them to accept that because they trust you, because they have experienced you as not controlling, power tripping, arbitrary, right? So not only are you, you know, sort of working on when you can say yes, but it helps you for when you have to say no.
Yes, 100%. And um, you made me think of something else in there, but I might have lost it. Oh, I think it's Patty Whitfler that says give the gift of no, right? That like of course we're going to have to say no, and we're going to have to set limits. And sometimes that brings big emotions, and it's
Mhm.
okay. And we can sit with those big emotions, and they don't have to be scary because they're natural. They can feel scary for sure for us as parents, but yeah, that it's not this. And I think I love that you talk about that a lot, that this is not permissive, because I think that's probably, I don't know if that's your experience, but that's a big fear for parents, is like not being permissive and not letting my kids walk all over me. And of course, permissive parenting is harmful. And so it is like, no, this is not about being permissive.
Well, it's interesting because I think that what I define it after years and years of doing this, what I define as permissive is when parents are being too flexible because they um, don't have the energy or they can't handle it or they're just like, okay, fine, whatever, right? Like I would
Mhm.
say that's permissive, but I think there is a lot of like flexibility and collaboration that gets lumped in with permissiveness, which I would like to kind of separate those things out. Because I think, you said permissive parenting is harmful. I always tell people, and there are some downsides that the research has shown to permissive parenting, but it's a lot less harmful than authoritarian parenting.
Mm,
So, I really think if you obviously we want to walk the line between the two approaches, but
mhm,
if you had to be one way more than the other, I think it's much less harmful for kids to be permissive than it is to be controlling.
mhm.
So if, I also worry sometimes that people have sort of used the language of peaceful parenting to just be controlling, but in a nicer way. So like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I'm gonna set this limit because I know that setting limits is important, but really it's just that you like your way better, and you're just gonna be nice about it. Do you know what I mean? Like I really worry about that some of this
Mhm.
language has been co-opted to just be like sugar-coated control.
Mhm.
Like, I said no, and now I'm gonna just be really empathetic while my child cries.
Mhm.
Because I just didn't feel like doing it there. Like I'm trying to think of an
Right. It's
example, but do you know what I'm
arbitrary,
saying?
an
Yeah,
arbitrary no, not a
yeah,
safety
right. So
concern or a.
I really encourage parents to think before they set a limit, like, is this actually necessary? Is
Mhm.
it, a health or safety limit? And I think parents' own mental health can be lumped in with the health or safety limit because, well, yeah, I had a client once whose like kid wanted to do glitter at 7 o'clock. And while they probably could have done it, it just wasn't like the parent just didn't have the energy to deal with like a messy craft at 7 o'clock. Okay, you're going to say no in that situation because of your own, it's not as health or safety for your kid, but it might be a mental health issue for you. And you
Mm-hmm.
try as hard as you can to do glitter in the morning and, when you've got more energy and more bandwidth. So I do want us to be careful about that sort of the limit setting as a way to just be controlling, peaceful parenting limit setting as a way to be controlling. So I just wanted to put that out there whenever anyone talks about people being permissive. I just, I think it's good to draw that distinction.
Yeah, I like that because it is a fear. And then I love that you're saying, well, the research is showing that the authoritarian parenting is even more harmful. And it makes me think of Daniel Siegel talks about the yes brain, and the yes brain part of it is being flexible, right? Like
Hmm.
when we can be flexible as parents, that means our brain is in a good yes brain state, and we can
Hmm.
model being flexible with our children. And I always think of that about for myself, like, am I being rigid right now, or am I being
Hmm.
flexible? Like, why is it so important to me that they put their backpack away or that they like I'm feeling really rigid. I don't think
Hmm.
this is about health, like healthy boundaries or limits or what. I think I'm just stuck in a rigid brain
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now. I need to not put that on them, and I
Yeah.
need to figure out why am I being rigid, because I think yes, like being flexible and like the everything does not always have to be exactly this way
Hmm.
is healthier for me as a parent, for the kids.
Yeah, and I think that and having again having the benefit of hindsight and seeing like there were people I'm sure who would have said I coddled my kids, right? And when you think about the word coddling, what it actually means
Oh.
is to treat with care, right?
Mhm.
That's what coddling actually means is to treat with care.
I'll take
And I'm
that badge, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure there were people who said, Sarah lets her kids like get away with stuff. And, you mentioned the hanging up the backpacks.
mm-hmm.
I did a lot for my kids. Like I did a lot of, carrying things and doing things for them. And like, I remember one time my husband and my daughter and I were leaving the house at the same time, which was unusual. And she was probably around 7. And she was I carried her backpack for her. And that's what she wanted. Mama, will you carry my backpack? And I did that every day. But I guess he wasn't aware of it. He was like, why are you carrying her backpack? And I'm like, I don't know. It's, she wants me to, and I'm happy to do it. And I was confident that she would be carrying her own backpack when at a certain point, right? And not only that was she carrying her own backpack within, a year or 2 years, she wouldn't be caught dead with me carrying her backpack because that was babyish or whatever. But now, whenever we go anywhere, she insists on carrying everything. Like she's like, we'll be carrying groceries, and she'll be like, "Mama, I've got, I'll be
Oh.
standing there with my hands free," and she's like carrying all the heavy, and I'm like, "I can carry something." She's like, "No, no, that's okay, I got it." Even my son, my middle son, the other day offered to carry my purse for me. And
Oh.
I was like, it's okay, I can carry my own. And I'm able-bodied, right? It's not like they're doing this because I have some sort of limitations. But
Mhm.
I really believe that when we're doing things for kids when they're growing up, we are modeling for them to be a person who helps other people, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that it's like they learn what they live. And you talked about it in terms of flexibility, which I think is super important, but also caretaking. Like I have a client who she gets in these battles with her daughter about washing out her lunchbox containers. Her kid's like 12 or 13.
Mhm.
And they'll get in like a weekend long battle because the kid didn't wash her lunch containers on the Friday afternoon. And I was like, could you just wash her lunch containers for her? And she's like, well, I want her to learn that we take care of our own messes in the world, and that this person is really like on that, sort of the state of the world really is important to her. And she
Mhm.
sees that, she said, in the world, nobody's cleaning up their own messes. And I want her to learn that. And I said, but also, don't you want her to learn the power of caring for others and of nurturing? She was like, oh, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
like it's
I
just
love that
we're
reframe.
yeah. And I said, what if you could just do her lunch containers for her and make her feel nurtured and cared for? And so you can look at it either way. Like some people might say, you use the phrase like my kid's walking all over me. you could look at it that way, or you could look at it like this particular kid had two extracurriculars that she did. She was a really good student. She
Mhm.
helped out the family in other ways. She liked to cook and bake, and like there was this thing that they were stuck on, right?
Yeah, I love that because I mean, I love that you're bringing it to everyday moments and how we can have these really good intentions of wanting to teach something and that we might be missing this whole other part. And it's kind of like the pendulum swing that you were mentioning earlier. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to teach our children to do things for themselves, but
Hmm.
there's also amazing things in teaching and modeling and caring for our children
Hmm.
and seeing that. And I love how you're saying that you've now watched your adult children that they internally just have this drive to care for you and care for each other and care for people in the world because that's what they experienced. And
Yeah,
so
and
it's,
and caring for each other is my I so I was away last week, and wouldn't you know it, my daughter broke her ankle while I was away.
oh,
And she was at the climbing gym. She fell. She couldn't get in touch with her dad because he was in some meetings and wasn't answering his phone. She called her brother. That was like the next, it's gonna make me cry, but she called her brother. That my sons, they don't live at home anymore. In fact, they live together, which I love. They're roommates. She
that
called
is
her brother, and her brother met her at the hospital and stayed with her until for like 4 or 5 hours until my husband could get off work and come and be with her at the hospital. And then when she was, while I was away, still, she was, housebound, foot up, and both of them came over to visit her and spent the afternoon with her. And it's just like they're so caring and they're so like loving with each other. And yeah, I can't say enough about how
Mhm.
wonderful it is to have kids who were raised with this approach who are just such great humans.
Yeah, it makes me really feel like you do such a beautiful job of helping Dr. Laura Markham's like books and work come to life, like
Hmm.
I'm thinking of the sibling book and like that's one of my favorite books and it's kind of like I wish I could just read that every day and just
Hmm.
you now are seeing these amazing benefits of not only this parent-child relationship, but this family relationship where the relationships are different between them because you didn't punish them for hitting each other or punish them for
Hmm.
like you, I'm sure, built in that collaboration and cooperation between siblings as well. Sarah, I could talk to you for hours and the rest of the day, and I love getting to chat with you, but I know you have to go. So
Yeah.
I want to see if there's anything else. I had all these questions, but you just had so much I didn't even need them.
I'm chatty,
Great.
Michelle. I'm very chatty.
Which is great. I love it. I mean, I learned so much, even just the like making sure not to take something you hear, right? Like even the word boundaries. I kind of hate that word.
I never ever use the word boundaries, and I
It's
almost never
a
I don't use the word limits anymore either. Like I've actually really
okay.
evolved as because I started to get that icky feeling that I mentioned about like, yeah, people are like saying, setting limits with empathy. I don't have that as one of my big ideas anymore. Like, right, I talk about collaboration and teamwork with health
Mhm.
and safety limits is what I talk about now. Because I just anyway, sorry, I started to go off
No, no,
again.
it's good because in emotionally focused therapy, I guess that's when the boundaries became like a four-letter word for me because I see and hear people talking about attachment and talking about these things, but it's almost like like needing boundaries becomes like a way of protecting themselves and keeping distance. And
Mm,
I think it's similar like you're describing with children. Like it's not that the word boundary is always 100% bad, but it can be used in ways that aren't helpful. And I can hear
mhm,
what you're saying about limits. It can be used in ways that are not helpful. And it is interesting to always just keep thinking and kind of keep hearing things with our eyes and ears open and not just take something and then we, might apply it with I don't know, all of our old stuff rather than like, what does this really mean? And how's this really going to affect the child? And how's this really going to affect our relationship? So before I let you go, if anyone's listening right now and feeling like they keep, struggling in these moments, especially I think the hardest moments was when their kiddos are having a hard time, right? Like, and
mhm,
they want to be the peaceful parent. They want to show up calmly. but then they feel really far away from that at times. Like, what would you say to those parents who are struggling in that spot?
Yeah, well, take care of yourself. I mean, we sort of started by talking about that. Take care of yourself, even if it means that you maybe aren't as perfect of a parent as you need to. You know, you mentioned the like how we think we have to do everything and be everything. And we didn't evolve to raise children alone like we do. So, you know, really asking yourself, like, do I really need to make that, thing for the class, party or whatever? I don't know. Like,
Yes, yes.
really cutting back what you can to take care of yourself is a really good way to show up better for your kids.
Hmm.
And also, I think connecting to, I mean, over the years, I've realized that the reason why I'm doing this work is because I want people to see that children are inherently good, right?
Hmm.
Like that, and really connecting back to that they're doing the best they can. They want to be good. They're having a hard time, not giving me a hard time. Do they have bad behavior? Yes. Do they try to manipulate us? Yes. But
Hmm.
it's all in the service of like they're small, messy creatures who haven't lived on this planet for very long. And, manipulation is that like it's just a negative way of saying they're trying to get their needs met, right? Like,
Right. Oh, that's so true. Like
yeah. And
trying to get
it's
their needs
smart.
met. And manipulation is another one of those four-letter words, like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's an
Like,
unhelpful way to think about it. But thinking about they're trying to get their needs met, that's a really helpful way to
yeah.
think about it.
And
Yeah.
most of the time, we'll just say bad behavior can fall into the categories of like they're low on resources, they're,
Mhm.
emotionally dysregulated, they're trying to get a need met, they don't exactly know what that need is or how to get it met. But like, really, if you can really truly believe that children
Mhm.
are inherently good and that
Mhm.
they're doing the best they can, to me, that is the biggest leg up in peaceful parenting. Because
Yeah.
if you believe that too, you won't be tempted to punish them. Because
Right.
you're like people who are doing the best they can, you don't want to make them feel bad. You don't have an urge to make them feel bad if you just have empathy for them instead of feeling angry about whatever they've done.
Right. Then that becomes punishment becomes illogical, right?
Hmm.
Which
Hmm.
I love that point. So, Sarah, I know that you have your podcast, the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Where else can people find you or learn more about your work?
Sure. So, reimaginepeacefulparenting.com has my podcast. It has information about coaching, my membership, lots of free resources. I have a lot of downloads. You mentioned siblings. I have a free, like, Stop Sibling Fights little ebook. I have a free course, How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids. So, there's a bunch of resources. I also have a Substack where I send out like a inspirational, informational newsletter every week. And if you just searched up my name in Substack, you'd be able to find that.
Awesome. And I will share all of those links with in the show notes so you guys can find all
Great.
of them easy. And for all of you listening, the light in me sees the light in you. And a reminder, this content is intended for educational purposes only and should not be used as a replacement for private psychotherapy services. And Compassionate Heart Mindful Life does not provide psychotherapy services in any capacity. Thank you again for listening.